evening, everybody, and welcome to From the Heart. I'm Liz Walker. It is so wonderful to be back with you after being away for several weeks. You know, I've been selling my book, No One Left Alone. So I've been on a book tour since April, and we've been all over New England with our book tour, and it's been pretty successful and very exciting. No One Left Alone, the story of how community can help us heal. But we are back, and I cannot think of a better way to get restarted than to have the guests we're having tonight. You know, the Can We Talk Network is focused on collective trauma healing, and it's being replicated around the country. And more people are drawn to the idea of creating these safe community spaces where all of us can share our painful stories and heal together. Occasionally, we like to introduce to you some of the people who make those healing communities possible. And tonight, very special guest. We are thrilled to welcome Reverend Dr. Ternae Jordan and Donivan Brown, who are from the Can We Talk Chattanooga program. Both are specialists in supporting men. But there's much more to these guests than that. And Micah, if you bring them on now so I could just tell our audience about them. Welcome both of you. It's good to see you, but let me tell our guests who you are. Dr. Jordan is the pastor of Mount Canaan Baptist Church in Chattanooga. He is the founder of the anti-violence program called Stop the Madness. He is the visionary behind the Purpose Point Community Health Center. And his book about transformational leadership is called Crossing Jordan. I love that title. Donivan Brown is founder and executive director of the Horton Keller Center for Traumatic Healing in Chattanooga. He is a public speaker, a consultant, a storyteller, an organizer, a moderator, and a facilitator. These are both men of God and both men who are doing some incredible work on their own. And we are thrilled to have them as part of the Can We Talk Network. So to both of you, welcome to our From the Heart face stream. I'm delighted to finally get to see you here.
Thank you, Dr. Liz. We're excited about being here tonight.
All right. Well, my first question, and we've got lots to talk about tonight. It's a broad question, but I'm gonna ask you both. And Dr. Jordan, I'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about your community, Chattanooga. Now, you're actually from Chattanooga. So tell me some of the best things about your community and maybe even some of the challenges.
Well, Dr. Liz, again, I am from Chattanooga. I was born and raised here. I've been here all my life except for about 15 years that I spent in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Returned back to Chattanooga about 21 years ago and started pastoring here. Chattanooga is a great community. It is known as the scenic city of the South. As a matter of fact, it's located on Interstate 75 and pretty close to 65. So if you're going from the tip of Florida all the way to the Canadian line, you got to pass through Chattanooga. We've got a lot of beautiful scenery around here. It is the home of the Confederate. We've got a lot of Confederate battlegrounds. Of course, being in the South, we are still being challenged with many of the things that are the South has to be that deals with, particularly in this particular climate that we're in now. So it's a great place to raise kids. It's a great place to live. But like most cities, we're dealing with urban problems.
Absolutely. Donivan, what would you add to that? What are some of your biggest challenges? Dr. Jordan said urban problems.
I think like a lot of cities in the country, we're grappling with a housing crisis. In the context of this, there are many historical and traditional African-American communities where folks are feeling displaced in the pressure of rising rents and property tax costs. One thing Reverend Jordan noted as he highlighted some of the wonderful things about this community, right? I mean, it's an incredibly beautiful place. Mountains. If you like hiking, if you like the water, getting out on your boat, if you like kayaking, this is a remarkable place for that. And one of the things I love most is our river walk. like a number of cities, some of the folks in recent decades have really organized the city in such a way where right along the river is just 10, 12 miles of just greenway. And it's just really, really wonderful. Now, one thing I can say, it's hot and humid down here. Not like Mississippi, not like New Orleans, but that's one of the things that I would say. If we could just dip that humidity 10, 12% in the summertime, we might be the largest city in the nation.
Well, let me just give you the latest scoop, baby. It's hot and humid everywhere right now. So we all share that.
I'm hearing this.
Yeah, I'm Boston. Yes. It was, I'm sure it got up to 100 somewhere. It was 99 in my little part of the community.
Oh my.
Now, you guys, Donivan, you were the one who brought Can We Talk to Chattanooga. How did you even find out about our Can We Talk program?
So in February of 2019, I snuck into a conference in Montgomery, Alabama. The focus is on race, trauma, and the gospel. And the real target population were mid-level management, folks who are doing college ministries. And I met a man there who was presenting at a conference the year before. And given the nature of the work I was doing at the time within a particular church population towards racial reconciliation or really healing from the legacy of American racism, I attended the conference. Really remarkable in Montgomery. There's so much there to see, so much to encounter, to experience. One of the panelists on the final day, her name is Sheila Riseborough, based in Boston, has spent a decade living, working in South Africa, had a book coming out called Healing Racial Trauma, which came out some months later. I told her about the fact that as I was a board member of what was effectively the Black YMCA in Chattanooga, the J.A. Henry, that we were in the pursuit of organizing a community trauma response that would be culturally relevant, contextualized for our footprint. So Sheila, I talked to Dr. Rowe, Miss Rowe, and she pointed me to what was happening in Boston. She said, there's a church there, and they've cultivated a community trauma intervention, and they believe in helping other communities establish their own. So that following week, I made contact there, made a trip in the context of the work of the YMCA in that spring, and I met you, Colleen, and I returned like Prometheus. You know the Greek mythology. I came back with flames from Mount Olympus, and it just so happened that I had become acquainted with Reverend Jordan, but I didn't know about Purpose Point and the community health center which was unfolding, and it seemed to be a perfect merger of spiritual health, community health, moral health, the broader health of the person and the community. So I heard about it through Sheila Riseborough at a conference in Montgomery, Alabama on race, trauma, and the gospel.
And then moved right into Dr. Jordan's work with Purpose Point. So let's just go right there. Dr. Jordan, you've always had this vision of healing, not just spiritually, which is the most important thing, but mentally and socially. Tell us a little bit about your vision and how Purpose Point, how your church fits in it, first of all, and then on to Purpose Point.
Well, I've had 41 years in pastoring. And I served for 15 years in the city of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I went there in the middle of crack epidemic. Our church was a large church sitting right in the heart of the city. And every day there was another young African-American male that was either found dead or shot. And so we started a program called Stop the Madness. I've always been a firm believer, Dr. Liz, that if you are a church in a community, you ought to do one or two things. You ought to affect the community, or you ought to infect that community.
Come on.
We infect the community with the love and our compassion and touching lives. We infect the community because we are there. And so I've always had an outside focus. We started a program called Stop the Madness there. I've had the unfortunate task of funeralizing 105 young African-American men. And it was there that I found the one thing that they all had in common was usually the absence of a positive male role model. So our church there, the Greater Progressive Baptist Church, we started Stop the Madness as an arm. And then in 2004, my father, who had pastored the Mount Canaan Church back in Chattanooga, my home church, retired and developed Alzheimer's dementia. And I had to come back home to take care of the family and to take the church. And my heart, my mission was that we will not come back in here and sing and shout. We're going to infect or affect the community. And so one of the ways that we started the Purpose Point Community Health Center, which we are sitting in the worst zip code for health disparities in the state of Tennessee. And so what a better way for us to move into that community and start to trying to take care of some of the health disparities. And then we started an early learning center that has blossomed out of there. And we've got about 150 kids that we started in the last couple of years and about 90 people on the waiting list. So wow. It has always been I believe that the church's role is to be a filling station. Mm-hmm. And that is when we come in here on Sunday, we fill our people up. We have the greatest number of volunteers because if you're saved, you're a disciple. And so we come in to fill up and we run out of gas the rest of the week. And so that has been my mantra since we were in Indiana. And God has been faithful as we've come back to Chattanooga. There have been people that have bought into the vision, and we're proud to have connected with Can We Talk, because we, in this building, in our East Chattanooga location, we have a worship service to take care of the spiritual aspect. We have the health center and resource center to take care of the physical. And now we have Can We Talk to take care of the mental.
Praise the Lord. So we're covering it all. I would guess, and this is my sophisticated guess, but still a guess, that you are an exception to the rule. And I'm going to throw this out to both of you. Do you think that your church and your kind of approach, your holistic approach, is the exception, or is it the rule when we talk about, I'm going to say Black churches, but churches in general? Do you think more and more churches are doing what you're doing, or is it still a challenge?
I think it's still a challenge. And I think it's still a challenge because we don't have many models. And that is one of the things that I've always believed, that the vision that God gave me was not for Mount Canaan. And there are a lot of people that don't believe that you can do it. There are a lot of people that laughed at us when we started doing it. But I just believe that the Lord had given me the vision that we pushed through. And so people are not laughing anymore, but they also understand that the needs are great. So I wouldn't like to say that I am the exception or we're the exception, but we want it to be the example.
Donivan, how do you define community trauma? Because what I believe I see in Boston, what I'm sure Dr. Jordan would define in Chattanooga, is collective trauma, not just trauma of individuals, but of whole communities. How do you define that, Donivan?
I think one of the clearest examples of community trauma in recent history within the United States was what happened on September 11th, 2001. While the attack was in New York City, there were two buildings in particular. The reverberations were felt throughout New York State, throughout the greater metropolitan area, throughout the entire nation. I know a story of a young man who, when he was a kid at the time, and he was telling me he was 8, 9 years old, an elementary school student, and his concerns after the attacks that would Chattanooga be struck by this. And I had a friend who's a therapist said to me once that collective trauma, that which happens to us, requires collective healing. And I would say that we as Americans are models or examples, if you will, to borrow a term from Pastor Jordan. But if someone breaks your heart, right, you have this romantic interest, someone breaks your heart, there's books, there's movies, there's TV shows, there's podcasts, you can talk to your friends. If someone dies, we have the funeral process. However, I would contend that if you found out today or tomorrow that your factory is shutting down, right, that your workforce is going to have to be trimmed, that would be a collective trauma for that particular community. Therefore, it's not merely the responsibility, the health responsibility for the individual, if it's something that we are experiencing together. And if it's indeed true, and I accept the wisdom of my friend, the insight of other researchers, that collective pain, collective trauma requires collective healing, so I would say that which affects us. Now, there's things that many of us experience, like Reverend Jordan highlighted the fact that many of the folks he worked with in the context of Stop the Madness did not have the positive male role model. So you had something that was happening on a cultural level that was affecting so many folks individually. Another prime example, tragic example of a collective trauma is the 246 years of chattel enslavement that was heaped upon, that was levied against the African Americans before we were even called American in this place.
Mm-hmm. We have I believe, a very special relationship as African Americans, as Black people, with trauma, because it is so embedded in our history. And I'm not comparing us to other cultures or other races. I'm just saying that what we go through now is compounded because of history. And so when we talk about healing, it seems like a big job. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to heal. And I'll throw this out to both of you. And I think, Dr. Jordan, you've touched on that holistic approach, and that probably is your answer. But tell me more about that. When we have to heal people who generational trauma, historical trauma, all the things that we face as Black people.
History is so important. My degree is in marketing because I didn't want to be a preacher. My dad was, so I majored in marketing, but I minored in Black religious studies, which was the social aspect of the role that the Black church has played in the history of our people. And so I've known that the church has always been that institution in our communities, whether it was for educational purposes, whether it was for entertainment purpose. We couldn't go anywhere else. We couldn't go to the movie. So the church was the central place that we got whatever healing it was. Faith for me is foundational, as I know it is for you. And I think that was one thing that really excited me when Donivan dropped this program on us, Can We Talk? He mentioned Dr. Liz. He mentioned what the church was doing in the heart of Roxbury. Well, that was my kind of thing, because I realized how important the role of the church is. And it is generational, because for a long time, as I said, we didn't have any other institution. Every institution that we had was started out of the Black church. Schools were taught in the Black church, in the one room. HBCs, because we couldn't go to state schools, were started out of the Black church. So the Black church has always played a role historically, generationally, and now that we're still being affected by history. As you know, trauma does not live in the head, trauma lives in the body. And it is passed on from generation to generation. So we have that role, and that is why we've tried to take on the holistic approach. But for people of color, faith has always been that foundation that has gotten us through when these other entities were not available to us.
Absolutely. Donivan, I wanted to talk a little bit just to add to that, and please feel free to say anything you want to say, but the idea of suffering as redemptive. I never fully understood that until Can We Talk? And I went to divinity school, I went to seminary, I studied the Bible, but I see it through this idea of people who have going through pain, but reach out to other people. And so that's how you kind of heal, because you're no longer alone. Would you agree with that? Or what do you think about the idea of suffering as redemptive in current times?
If it's evident that one of the confounding and compelling and tragic components of what it means to be human is that We all suffer. We all struggle. I don't think that a single individual, no matter how wealthy, has that life is easy for them. We all experience death, and none of us know what comes on the other side, in the sense that there's not been any book reports. There's not been any video studies that have been sent back from the other side. So in one respect, we all walk by faith. So if indeed what is painful to us, if indeed what's grounds us to dust, water can be added to that, mortar can be formed, and it can be foundational for other people to build upon that. So if I say I'm broken, I need healing, and I pursue that, and then I am motivated to return back to the place in which I've come from, the folks who experienced what I experienced, and then I certainly think that that could be therapeutic. That idea of seeking to breathe life back into those whose bodies were cold in the metaphorical sense as ours were due to trauma. But also the question itself, it hits me, right? The idea of through suffering that something could be gained or benefited. Now, I know the best athletes don't cross the finish line without the suffering toll of thousands of hours of challenge and running and sweating in 10-degree temperatures in Boston and 95-degree temperature down in Florida. And so it seems to me that if whatever the other side is, and also that pain is elemental to the human experience, that it does require us to look where we've been and to ideally reach out to others who've been where we've been.
Wow, I love talking to y'all because both of you all are like such preachers. Hallelujah.
I love just listening. Just put me in the room. You know what I'm saying? Give me a water and just listen to the two reverends speak and pontificate.
Dr. Jordan, how would you add your sermon to the sermon we just heard?
There's nothing I can say except amen. But I totally agree. I mean, the whole essence of faith, it's really interesting because in this season, I am in a series of sermons on next level living, breaking generational curses to build legacy. And it is out of our history, it is out of pain that you learn resilience, that you learn, and it's difficult to have faith if you don't have something to have faith in. And I think as a race of people that have come from nothing, for us to even be where we are, and that gave us the drive, it had to be through suffering. But even now, I think we're such a resilient people because of the suffering. I mean, people are talking about what the economy is going to do and what tariffs are going to do. I'm not thinking about that. I mean, it's always been a struggle for me. The tariffs are going to be a problem for people who ain't had to deal with them. Okay, we will survive because of the suffering that we have gone through. So I agree, suffering has to be a part of it. And then if I'm going to be theological about it, it was through Jesus' suffering that we have salvation. So
absolutely,
we, the preachers, will believe. Yeah,
absolutely. Christine Rose, who's listening to us or watching us, says truth, resilience is how we learn. I want to talk about, though, what we call it, can we talk, post-traumatic growth, because I think that, yes, resilience, just by its mere definition, gets you back to where you were. But what happens in faith situations and with the help of God, you can get further ahead. You can actually turn the pain around. And I don't wish pain on anybody. At the core of our program, of course, is the Corey Johnson, the death of a young man whose mother is one of our facilitators and leaders. And her situation will never change. She won't get her son back. But she talks about 10 years, 11 years out. Well, actually, it's been more than that. He was killed in 2010. So it's been almost 15 years out from his death. How she's beginning to experience joy again. doesn't change her situation, doesn't bring Corey back. But it's just that idea that when you are used by God and your purpose comes out and you are doing what you're supposed to do, even with the worst thing that ever happened to you, you can experience joy. And I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it in her. You know, it's one thing to read it in the Bible, and you should believe that. But when you see it, I've seen it, and I know it's real.
Dr. Liz, I am a witness. I am a witness. I tell you, I buried 105 young men. After burying my 12th young person, my own son, I was out in the community talking about stopping the madness and gang violence and stop the drugs and that kind of thing. And I wanted to put my kids in a safe place. So I had a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so I placed them in the YMCA. Now get this is a safe place, the local YMCA. And I told them, after piano lessons, you do not leave the building, wait until your mother picks you up. Well, this particular Wednesday night, I was teaching Bible study, and my children were at the YMCA. When an altercation took place inside, the kids were put out, guns were drawn, and they were pointing back toward the YMCA. 2 bullets entered the Y, 1 landed in the wall, and the other one in my son's head, my 15-year-old son. I got the call. I ran around to the Y, and there was ambulance, fire trucks, red, yellow tape, ran in, and there laying in the floor was my own 15-year-old son. And I bent down over him and I said, TJ, this is your dad. And his eyes walled to the back of his head. They took him to the hospital, put him on the gurney and hooked him up. And the monitor began to get straighter and straighter. I am standing there who have buried all these other kids, but now my kid is a victim. And we didn't know what he was going to live or die. As a matter of fact, they told us that if he lived, he would be a vegetable. So the next day, the AP wires across the country, people convened on Fort Wayne, because the irony is that the one person who's in the street fighting gang violence and fighting violence, now son has become a victim. So they brought television cameras and asked if Angela, who was my wife, and I would speak to the cameras. And I didn't know what to say. But there was one thing that I did know, and that is I had buried 12 kids. And I had stood in the pulpit and I had told them that God would see them through the loss of their children. And so that day when I stood in front of the cameras, what do you say? This is your child.
Right.
But what made me stand my faith is that there could have been thousands of people watching, but I knew that there were 12 families that were watching who I had told them that God would see them through it. And so I had no choice but to look in that camera, but at those 12 families, and said, I don't know what God wants to do, but if he wants to use our son as an example, we're willing.
Wow.
That was by faith. My son is on a ventilator. We don't know whether he's going to live or die. But what I can tell you, and you can't make me doubt it, that faith works. My 15-year-old son, who was standing beside my 12-year-old daughter, is now my 45-year-old son. He is my assistant pastor, still has a bullet in his head.
Wow.
After I watched God bless me for that faith, you can't make me doubt anything. And it has been that resilience that has allowed me to take things that people said are impossible. Can't do. They can't do that. What is he doing with that building over there?
Right.
Out of my way. Okay. God has shown me that if you got the faith and the resilience and you're willing to grow from your suffering, there is nothing you can't do. So I'm a
Right.
living witness. And
You
that
are.
is my, yeah.
You are indeed. Now, everybody doesn't have your kind of faith, and those are the people that we are saying we can walk with you. We can show you just by our experiences and Dr. Jordan's experience. But let's talk about that population that is our biggest challenge, at least in my mind, and that's our young men. Both of you are experts in the healing of young men. Donivan, how do you begin to talk to young men? Because I think young Black men have more trauma than any other segment of our population. Would you agree? And how do you begin to try to help young men?
I think what we see in our country across the board with young men is a profound sense of nihilism. Many believe that the potential of becoming a viable member of your community, a husband or a partner, to build a life, to even buy a house, that time is long since past. Particularly young Black men, and I think that the expression of nihilism in many cases has expressed itself in the form of community violence. We see a lot of high rates of homicides with young Black men, but we see high rates of suicides from young white men. In fact, the Horton Keller Center, we sought to name what we do down here in the similar kind of strategy and structures you did in Boston with Corey Johnson. Ryan Keller was a white friend of mine from a good family in Memphis who was serving and lived right behind where we currently have Can We Talk at Mount Canaan site there in East Chattanooga, where Purpose Point is. And as his mother said, he kind of swam too far from the shore. Then we'd go to church together, we get tacos, we go on walks, and it was evident to me that there was a pain he was carrying, and ultimately he took his own life 8-9 years ago, and the pain of that reverberated there. The young kids, in fact, Reverend Liz, Dr. Jordan, you know that we just wrapped up our fifth cohort. I work with Doug Lomax there in Boston and Phil to develop a 12-week trauma healing introduction for young Black men. And one of the young men who was in our last group knew Ryan Keller. He knew of the work that he was doing with middle schoolers at an predominantly African-American population. So I would say that, as we know, as the researchers have told us, if you have a parent who've experienced PTSD, then you are 3 times more likely yourself to encounter depression. Now, one thing Black folk have been good at is surviving. That we, in the context of the church and beyond, have developed any number of ways and schemes and systems and ways of being with each other. Even the term play cousin, right, is how we made family. When our family was shipped up, split apart, sent across country, we built new families. So I would say there is indeed there's a sense of like a dark cloud in many of our communities, and metaphorically at this time with AI and housing crisis and potential war. But there's something coming also from the earth. I think that there's so many unhealed wounds. And, I think when I first started on my own path of trauma healing when I was around 19, because I was 17 and I had things that happened like the rest of us. And I was just like any other dude. I had something bad happen. I just kept moving.
Right.
The things I saw in my household, my biological father died when I was 10, but he wasn't there anyway. And then something happened when I was 17 and I couldn't move the way I used to. And I had no skills. I had not one skill to get to the other side. And I took it to the Lord in prayer. And evidently what I was dealing with, the kind of trauma I had faced, needed prayer and other skills that God ultimately unfolded. So I would say that we've experienced death. We figure out so many clever ways to survive. I think that there's some long-standing wounds, deep sense of nihilism in a lot of the hearts, with young African-American men trying to make a way. And so, and I'll close by saying this, there is this interaction in the biblical scriptures where there's a man who's lying by a pool. And if he could just make it into that pool of water, he'd be made whole, he'd be made well. And then he's asked the question, do you want to be made whole? So on a fundamental level, the first question we must ask of ourselves, and for anyone in the context of Can We Talk or any casual conversation, does this person actually want to be made well? Now, wanting to be made well does not mean that you're going to, but that spark, that ignition, because your car ain't gonna run if you don't start that ignition. So you gotta have a key, put it in ignition, and be able to move from there. So I would say that desire to heal, there's long-term pain, a lot of unprocessed PTSD, but there is indeed hope.
That's very, 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 very profound. But I want to dig just a little deeper in that idea of, do you want to be healed? Because I would suggest that we might not even know what healing means. So when you know what it is, you want it. But you know what I mean? Our young people not know. What do you think, Dr. Jordan?
Well, first of all, healing is not a destination. It's a journey. And every step that one can take toward healing is a bit closer step to wholeness. And I have a philosophy that you can't be what you can't see, but you will be what you see. When we go back to my explanation of why men of vision, why try to find men that we can wrap around other boys and young men, most of us become products of police. And people don't like to hear this, but it goes back historically to slavery. I mean, the black male was the species that was put down. Women had to step up to keep the man who wanted to defend his family from getting in trouble and losing his life. So women even protected us back then. And then the other thing is, if you start back then where men are providers and that kind of thing that are snatched away from their families. People talk about why black men leave their families. Black men did not leave their families. You snatched them away from their families and placed them on other plantations for you to make money on them. And so if that's what you see and nobody is showing you what a real man is, it becomes generational. The other thing is, Dr. Liz, we live in a society where there's always been oppression against the black man, and we must be real about this. You can get $1 million grant to study apes and to save apes from becoming a dying species. You cannot get a $50,000 grant to save young black men. As a matter of fact, we would much rather build prisons and other places, cage them, rather than to make that investment. And so it's not new. And again, when you start it, if you want to put it in a simple, you can't be what you can't see, but what you will be what you see. And a lot of the young men that I work with, they were only being what they see.
What they saw.
Okay. I mean, they used to ask me, what are kids doing in your neighborhood? As a matter of fact, Nancy Reagan was the best. She said, just say no to drugs. Well, you can't say no to something. You got to find something to say yes to. And so and that was the purpose for Stop the Madness. She was saying, just say no to drugs. What you're going to tell kids in my community that have nothing to say no to when they don't have resources, they don't have jobs, they gotta eat. And then many of those that are on drugs, they want on drugs because they wanted to be cracked out. They want drugs to elevate themselves beyond their condition. And so we've got to give something to them. So my goal, as Donovan's goal, is us to ignite something in them. No, we may not be able to get you to the destination. We can start you on the journey. We can put positive role models in your life that you can look up to and see. And our young boys are not the only ones. Many of our older men, because of their history, grew up with their fathers, which consequently, and it bothers me when all of these wonderful people who studied psychology start telling us that our men are just no good. They just do. No, it is a systemic systems that are set up for our people, and no one wants to hear that. And in the climate we're in, they're doing everything they can to just wipe away the history. But you got to know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then you don't know where you're going. And we have got to get our young men to know who they are. And then we can light that fire in them and give them examples to look up so they don't have to repeat the cycles that they have observed growing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I'm most proud of that we talked to us, and Dr. Jordan, you may do this with other programs, is we try very hard, and Donivan and I talk about this all the time, to take this cohort of young men to Montgomery, to the legacy sites, so that they can get the story of our history and get the story of slavery, the real story. And Donivan, I think both of you will agree that it's a transformative experience for anybody to go down there. And these are young men from Boston. Some of these young men never leave Boston. It ain't a matter of having been to Alabama. They haven't been outside of Boston. So it really is. And I hope we continue, Donivan. I was talking to Danielle, one of the leaders of our program and one of the facilitators, about trying to keep this going. And we are going to try to keep it going because it's so important in any way. But the other part of this is just the conversations in Can We Talk? And Donivan, this is to you. How important are those conversations of the young men just getting to kind of talk about healing and talk about role models and talk about challenges? How important do you think those conversations are?
Well, let me first really provide a framework for those who are with us tonight. These are 12-week groups. Half the men are from Boston, half the men are from Chattanooga. It's all online, all on Zoom. Co-facilitator, Douglas Lomax of Boston, and Phil's last name just escaped me. Reason. Yes, Phil Reason, Brother Philip Reason. So he's the clinician. So he's there both as insight, but also if one of the men needs a moment alone with Phil can take that time with them during one of our sessions. And so it's been, to be honest, like the work, like I said, we just finished up our 5th group a few weeks ago. And, it's kind of precious. It's like there are these long-term stereotypes of what it means to be a young Black man. And so to see what unfolds on week 1, because week 1, no one really knows anybody, right? Particularly if you're from Boston, Chattanooga, that 17-hour difference there. We break down where we're going over the next 12 weeks, our process. We talk about Montgomery when that is woven into the experience. And so then by the time we get into week 6, you get a sense that the men have showed up. They've been kind of waiting all week for this night to come again. And so that sense of energy, sense of safety, that sense of warmth is developed between them. I got to say, as a young Black man, as an 18, 19-year-old who had no sense of how to heal, but was desperate in trying to figure out how to get from what I was in into something else, to be in a place where I can work alongside other African-American men, Phil a few years older than me, and Doug, effectively the grandfather of the group with decades of experience, wisdom from the heavens, to work with them to help usher other Black men into, as Reverend Jordan talked about the idea, you become what you see, so that to some extent we hope that we can become highlights, that we can become these senses of hope. And now we've not fully on the other side, but the path that we've taken to heal and to grow. And so those conversations, they start, some of our groups start off, the first group's kind of quiet. Sometimes they hit the ground running. And then one thing we do as well, so in the spirit of Can We Talk, because we understand the power of music and dance and art to help us heal. Because frankly, sometimes we don't have the words, right? And sometimes what happens is you go to church on Sunday morning and that gospel music, what's happening sonically, what's happening with the voices and the lyrics together, it helps process the pain in your heart that you might not have words for. So we close each of our sessions with one of the men's go-to songs. Like when you're having a rough week, a month, what do you play? What do you listen to? and we close each time, and then we at the end we send everybody songs, and so I would just say I don't actually fully have words for what it's like to observe these young men coming from what they've come from, moving through what they moved through, and being able to close together in Montgomery. It's just there's a part of me which is a bit speechless in describing the arc of the encounter, and we're just getting started. We're just getting started.
Wow. Well, I can't tell you, both of you, how amazing this evening has been in listening to you. Dr. Jordan, I'd go to your church any day you preach. So you will, I know you change lives and inspire people when you open your mouth. And Donivan, the work that you're both doing and the work that you're doing with young men, this is just a taste of what we're doing with our program and some of the partners that we're working with on our program. So thank you both for joining me tonight. Micah, I know you're out there. You had said we might open up for questions. If I don't know if you want to do that, Micah, who is my engineer and my tech and my assistant and my guru of all things social media. But if we do open up for questions, this would be a time now. If you have any questions or comments out there. Chat has been very, very quiet tonight, and I suspect it's been quiet because these are such compelling speakers and orators we have with us tonight. So again, I thank you both for joining us. I hope you'll come back and join me another time, would you?
Be glad to. And Dr. Liz, I want to thank you for your consistency and your commitment to Can We Talk and setting the example. I said earlier, you can't be what you can't see. Well, what we see and your vision and what you've been able to do is really laid a high platform for us to stand on. So thank you.
Well, you're both kind. I think what we're trying to tell people is that we're all in the image of God and we all matter. We matter to God. We should matter to each other. We're living in a time now where some people don't think others matter, but we all do. So that would be my little message from listening to both of you. But again, thanks for joining us. We will see you another time. And all of you out there, I'll be back next Tuesday with another compelling conversation from the heart. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.